Today I'm going to show you how to deal with one of the key issues that comes up from customers with raw honey, particularly in the winter months. It's one of the things that shows that the honey is raw, yet it puts many people off. If it's an issue for you, I'm going to take you through the steps to resolving it. And right at the end, I'm going to show you another really effective and novel solution. So what am I talking about? Honey crystallization. Let me make it clear right away that the properties of crystallized honey are exactly the same as runny honey. It is in no way inferior. Here at the raw honey shop, we often get messages from customers saying, my honey's gone off, it's gone solid, or my honey's turned to sugar. The thing is that raw honey is mainly glucose and fructose, which are kinds of sugar. Actually, the fact that honey crystallizes is a good indicator that it's raw. You see, supermarket honey has been heated and blended and fine filtered, which delays crystallization and keeps it runny on the shelves, but it creates a product that is a shadow of proper, real, raw honey. Anyway, why does honey crystallize? Basically, it's the glucose. The more glucose, the quicker it crystallizes. Honey is a supersaturated liquid. It contains more glucose than the moisture can absorb, unless the climate is very warm. That's why honey crystallizes quicker in cooler weather. Here you can see a runny honey, a part crystallized honey and a crystallized honey. By the way, when honey crystallizes, it lightens, which is why the crystallized oak is much lighter. Sometimes the crystallization starts from the bottom of the jar, sometimes the glucose and fructose separate completely, so you have crystallized glucose at the bottom and runny fructose above. It does depend on the balance between the glucose and fructose. Anyway, we do appreciate that not everyone likes their honey crystallized, and if you don't, there's something you can do about it. Here's what to do. So you need a source of heat, like a radiator, and you need a towel, and then we can start to turn your honey back to liquid. To start with, if the radiator is very hot, I tend to place a pamphlet on the radiator so there isn't direct transmission of heat. Then I place the jar or jars on the radiator and drape the tea towel over the jars. This allows the heat, it sort of traps the heat around the jars and allows it to circulate around the whole jars and not just the base. Now, it's important not to overheat the honey. We don't want to affect the antibacterial qualities. Generally, we'd say not more than 40 degrees Celsius. That's about the hottest the honey chamber in a hive will get in the peak of summer. How long should you keep the honey on the radiator? Well, different honeys will liquefy at different rates. So a honey like Ramon's oak or chestnut from Antonio will liquefy quite quickly, as it has more fructose than most honeys, maybe in 4 hours, but generally overnight. Rossend's raspberry, on the other hand, takes much longer, as it's predominantly glucose. It can be quite stubborn. This type of honey can take up to 2 days or even more. Sometimes you should turn the jar upside down, making sure the lid is really tightly on, and shake it a bit as you get some stubborn glucose at the bottom of the jar, and that needs detaching in order for it to dissolve. When the honey is ready, it should flow quite freely, which you can see by turning the jar upside down and observing the bubble rise right to the top. One thing to note is that before honey crystallizes, it tends to become quite cloudy, so you should make sure your honey has gone past that stage in the warming process, as otherwise it may set again quite quickly. You do need to be patient, particularly with honeys like raspberry. If you take the honey off too soon, as I mentioned before, it will crystallize again quite quickly. So we suggest that you give it a few hours extra from when you think it is ready. Another important point to note here, sometimes customers say, I've had the honey on the radiator for days, but it hasn't liquefied. On discussion, it turns out that the radiator is on a timer and only comes on for short periods. In these situations, it will be difficult to get it to liquefy properly. This is when you might want to try another approach. You can also turn your honey back to liquid by placing it in a bowl of warm water. It should be hand hot, but not more. You will need to top up with more warm water from time to time. You may find success within a few hours, as the total immersion tends to be quite effective. So when you think it's ready, tip the jar up and see whether the bubble rises right to the top. And if it flows freely and it's not cloudy, you'll know it's ready. So just give it a wipe and you're ready to go. So where should you store your honey? If you can find somewhere really warm and dark, then that can keep it runny for longer. And by the way, light tends to degrade the antibacterial qualities of honey, so that's why it's good to keep it in the dark. I mentioned at the beginning a novel solution that most people don't know about. You can assume that the colder the weather, the quicker honey will crystallize. But actually, when it drops below 5 degrees centigrade, honey will remain runny. So you could even put your spare jars in the freezer and keep the jar that you're using in the fridge, as long as that is below 5 degrees. it should stay runny indefinitely and the qualities of the honey will be preserved. So that's it. Any questions at all about anything that I've covered, please email me at info@therawhoneyshop.com or call on 01273 682 109 and I'll do my best to help, or if I'm not there then Illy or Claire will. And perhaps there's another topic you'd like us to cover with a video. If so, do let us know. Thanks.